Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I have the opportunity to sit down and talk about how do we ensure that we are utilizing our continuums of support within our schools. We not only break down the purpose of the continuum of supports and why it's a foundational component of collaborative response, but we also then share numerous insights and strategies for how they can be effectively utilized to impact conversations that are happening around the needs of our students. We can't wait for you to take away some key insights from this conversation. Let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts. This week, we really want to talk about something near and dear to our hearts, and that's a school's continuum of supports. Now, we know when we talk about a continuum of supports, in time, a school may have more than one based on priority areas that they are trying to impact, but really that continuum becomes an anchor resource. Something that we can consistently come back and reference when we're having conversations about what could we try, how could we respond, and it really does become that way, as we heard one administrator refer to it as our tool shed that takes everybody's individual toolboxes and puts it together. Again, it becomes a really powerful anchor resource when we think about how are we responding to the needs of students at the classroom level, school level, and beyond. But the conversation that often comes around is we've put effort and energy into this continuum. Oftentimes it's gone through multiple variations and draft revisions, and that's a topic for another day of how do we go and refine that continuum over and over time. But how do we ensure it's actually being utilized and not just, as I've seen in one school I've seen in many schools, and we did this as well, of we've got this thing, but it's sitting over in a corner and no one's really referencing, or
in a file,
or in a digital storage space. So let's go through some different ways that we could really make sure that continuum is coming to life and being utilized.
So I want to back up just a little bit because when we think about the development of a continuum, it is critical for the people in the building to create that continuum.
Right. It's owned by those closest to the students.
And then when we know that every person who is teaching in that building and the educational assistants can have contributions in that build as well.
Of course.
But when we know that they have contributed in a significant way to building that continuum, it already has the potential of having greater impact and a better use of it because people in the building own it.
Well, and again, we often, when we're working with schools of creating the draft, talk about using language that came out of the co-creation process, and it doesn't have to look perfect after the first collection of ideas, which it never does.
No.
It always takes refinements, but you're right. Being able to see my expertise reflected in this organizational document is really, really critically important.
And increases the probability that that document will actually be used because it's meaningful to the people who are using it.
So this is where we often talk about the product that's created has value, and that's what we're going to talk about next, is how do we make sure that that resource is getting referenced.
Yeah, for
but
sure.
the process of development and ongoing refinement is absolutely essential. You cannot take two teachers into a room and say you're responsible for creating our draft. Or sometimes we've seen a district where they'll say, good news, we'll have our divisional coordinators create this and then share it out back to the school. And then you're almost guaranteeing the utilization to be decreased right from the get-go.
Well, and I also think that it's kind of a shame when that happens, because there are incredibly powerful conversations that happen in the development of a continuum.
Yeah.
And in that process, those conversations are what it's all about.
It is 100%.
And people in schools are robbed of that amazing professional learning through conversation with their colleagues when only 2 or 3 people do that.
And again, you're trying to reinforce a cultural understanding of, we talk about practice in this building. It's just a natural way of how we interact. It's the first
door to open to allow that to happen.
Okay.
So let's get back to the topic we've
we've got this continuum, a document. We've often lovingly referred to it as the placemat.
Yes.
We have a placemat. How do we make sure it's actually being used throughout the school? Go ahead, hit us up with some ideas or suggestions that you've shared out with schools before. We'll be right back to continue this episode. There are 2 things that we know. The first is that implementing and sustaining collaborative response in schools is complex work. The second is that educators love a bargain. For this year's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we are planning something to address both of these realities. We are slashing the price of our Supporting Collaborative Response on-demand workshop bundle by 75%.
For 4 days only, our Supporting Collaborative Response workshop library is going to be available for only $50, reduced from our regular price of $200. So what do you get for only $50? You get a series of on-demand workshops, each focused on a particular aspect of collaborative response. There are currently 9 workshops, including an overview of collaborative response, but we plan to continue to add to the library over time.
Topics like creating focus for collaborative planning without micromanaging your teams, and 10 considerations when refining and utilizing your continuums of support are just 2 of the titles currently available. These 20 to 40 minute workshops are facilitated by myself or Lorna Hewson and include numerous resources and samples. They have been recorded so that they can be played and replayed as often as you wish. There is no expiration date for these workshops, so access them when it works best for you. In the time it takes to eat your lunch, you can engage in one of the workshops. This amazing offer is only available to our JL Insiders email list, so don't delay.
Join the JL Insiders by going to jigsawlearning.ca and clicking on the link at the bottom of the page to become a JL Insider. You can also go to bit.ly/J, lowercase insider to sign up. That's bit.ly/J, lowercase insider.
On November 29th, our JL Insiders will receive the exclusive code to access the entire workshop library for only $50. That's $150 in savings off our regular price. Check out the website jigsawlearning.ca to learn more and join the JL Insiders to have a chance at this incredible Black Friday Cyber Monday deal. And now back to our conversation.
For sure, there are a number of ways that we make that living and visible. And one is, of course, just making it visible. That's your first step in, is making sure that it's in all of the spaces where you are having team meetings.
So you're saying visible, print it off, available.
It off, put it on the table, put it on a big poster on the wall. Just having it everywhere and across your entire building. And that means not just in the staff room, not just in the meeting spaces, but in classrooms as well. So really having that visible and in everyone's space throughout their day.
So we've heard a number of teachers, particularly beginning teachers, who say, I've printed that up and it's right beside my desk as a reminder of things I could try. I think I would take it one step further and say, as a school, we're going to print a copy for every teacher and put in those spaces, and
Laminate
3 months.
them.
Yeah, laminate them, but understand that 3 months later, we might give you a refined next step version, because a continuum, if it's laminated and doesn't change over the next 1, 2, 3 years, it's probably not doing what it's intended to do of being a living document.
It just depends on the purpose for which you laminate it, because I have seen a high school who laminated a giant copy of their continuum and had it in their space so that they could actually take a whiteboard marker, and as they were talking, they were adding new strategies,
ideas,
and they were actually writing right on that laminated copy. And then when it got too messy, to be able to take it down, update everything on that poster, laminate it, and put it up again.
I love that. This is another strategy that I was going to bring forward too, is when we make it a role in our meetings. So whether we're in a collaborative team meeting, a school support team meeting, we say, Kurtis, you're our continuum curator. Or we saw one school that it was Captain Continuum, where it's your job during the meeting to be referencing and sharing ideas back. But then we've also seen schools saying, when a good idea gets shared, add it on, write it at the end of the conversation, hand it in, because we're going to use it to update. It's the same kind of idea of how you keep that an ongoing refinement.
Well, and
document.
that's a living process too,
100%.
right? Is just having it there. Another thing that we can do to really make it relevant in our context is when we're problem solving with about students, with parents, even with students themselves, especially students who are older, but being able to have that continuum right there to talk about what are the strategies that you think your child would be best suited to, or are any of these strategies things that you think would work well for your child, or for a student, would any of these work really great for you? You choose which strategy we're going to use.
Yeah, and with that, then you're building that ownership around their learning as well. So again, any conversation that we're having. So again, when I'm creating goals in an individualized student support plan, I should have that continuum right beside, because there could be some strategies that we could be implementing right into the program plan to help achieve some of the goals that are being established.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that becomes really critical in that ongoing development is that over time, you're going to create, 5 to 8 non-negotiables, what we would call non-negotiables, or tier 1 practices that are really considered to be critical in that particular school, in that particular area. And once we have created those 5 to 8, then we want to be able to make sure that everyone has a common understanding around that as well.
And that we're seeing them implemented in classrooms, so that as an administrator, when I'm engaging in classroom walkthroughs, these could be look-fors. In fact, one district, that's what they were referred to as. These are look-fors that we would see universally happening in each and every classroom. We'll actually include a template that we've developed that does take whatever those, we've sometimes affectionately referred to them as big rocks, whatever those big rocks are, and what ones are we looking for when we're coming in today or this week, and then being able to give some feedback or reflections. So with those big rocks, oh, sorry, you got it?
No, yeah. So, but with that walkthrough too, when we realize that teachers have contributed to the development and the decision making around what are our big rocks, and then being able to understand that as admin come for a conversation or for that walkthrough in the classroom, that they actually have contributed to the development of those things. So it becomes a a back and forth between what they develop and what we should be able to see, and that direct contribution of teachers in the decision making of what you should see when you come into my classroom.
And so that back and forth, and again, teacher involvement and even ownership, it could even be as collaborative teams when you're engaging in collaborative planning. Are there any big rocks that you're working on refining or building expertise on together? So again, that's a way to have it come alive. I'm thinking of one school in a metro board where they had their tier ones out publicly on a bulletin board with a QR code where you could scan, and it would discuss and describe what that big rock was and why it was critically important. Again, that's just a way to make that continuum be alive and constantly reflecting conversations that are happening.
The other thing that could be really beneficial is thinking about, once you've gotten to that space of those big rocks, to be able to share those out in school newsletters. To say, this is one of our core practices that we use in our school, and this is what it looks like. And just being able to have that consistent reminder to the whole school community about what we're focusing on.
So basically, to sum this up, when we talk about the utilization of a continuum, it's any place, time, or opportunity that we're talking about response, instruction, practice.
Yeah.
The continuum is there in hand or in sight as a reminder of, so what could we do?
So when we talk about our 4 layers of teams, then our continuum of supports has a place to play in each of those 4 levels of teams as
Absolutely. Well. That's a conversation we'll come back to deepening in a future episode, is aligning those tiers of a continuum with the layers of teams. It is very intentional. So we'll ensure that there's some resources and documents that are placed there. If you have any ideas that would help, that you're utilizing around ensuring that your continuum of supports is a live and an active contributor to conversations, please share out. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Love to see some examples. Yeah, for sure.
All right. And with that, we wish you all the best. Take care, and thank you for all that you do to support our students.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.